I'm told the story is true of a young mom in a grocery store with a 3-year-old little girl who's having a tantrum. They go down one aisle and the little girl sees cookies and she starts screaming, "Cookies, cookies." And her mom says, "Ellen, just a few more minutes. Just hang in there. We're almost done and then we'll be home." And then she rounds another corner and the little girl sees candy, and candy she's screaming and crying for it. "Ellen, don't cry. Don't cry, and we're going to be done here in just a few minutes, and then we'll be on our way home." And then she's checking out, and the little girl sees gum and throws even more of a tantrum. "Gum, gum." And the mom's like, "Ellen, honey, just hang on. We're almost through, and then you can go home. You can have a nice nap. Just hang on." And this woman who had watched this entire experience, she was so moved. She said, "I am so impressed with your patience with little Ellen." And the mom said, "You misunderstood. My little girl's name is Tammy. I'm Ellen." This world can be a rough place to navigate right now. How long has it been since you've really felt over the top happy? How long? So I know there's some of you in the room, you're like, "I feel that way all the time." No one likes you. Do you understand that? Most of us, we'd probably say, "You know what? It's been a while since I felt over the top happy." Life took its toll. The economy took my job. COVID took my health. The jerk took my heart. Happiness is a fragile thing. We know that. It's here today. It's gone tomorrow. You can be happy at 10 a.m. in the morning, and by noon, you can be sad. We search for happiness, but we're told fewer and fewer are finding it. Recent study, this is dark, but we might as well let's talk. Let's be real with each other today. A recent study showed that right now, during this time in our history, we are more depressed, more worried, more dissatisfied, more frustrated, more empty than any time before in our life. Joy is leaking away, it feels like, even from good Christian people. However, maybe we're looking at this thing wrong. Maybe, is there a chance we're just doing life right now a little bit wrong, and God has an answer to all of this darkness? A recent study also showed this, that joyful people are focused on something positive in the future. Joyful people are focused on something positive in the future, a vacation, a promotion, a family event, an upcoming wedding, a raise, a move, a new whatever might be out there. I know that we have this habit of searching for happiness, and maybe that's wrong. Because circumstances can make happiness so risky, so fragile. Joy, on the other hand, we know is not rooted in circumstances. Jesus said a lot about finding joy. And it might just be closer than you and I had ever imagined before. This is a dark time for many of us. It's dark in my life too. Not everything is going perfect in my life. Not everything is easy to navigate right now. And what's true in my life is true in yours. And Jesus had a lot to say about that. He's about to say some things to his disciples. Now, just real quick, we're going through the life of Jesus through the Gospel of John. Jesus and his disciples are somewhere between the Garden of Gethsemane and the upper room. They've left the upper room. We're clear on that. I don't quite believe they're in the Garden of Gethsemane yet where Jesus will pray. And so they're walking and talking. And as Jesus does often, he just suddenly turns around and he has some things to share with his disciples. And what he's about to share with them is that tonight's going to be rough. Well, he's about to be arrested. You know what they can't see that Jesus can see? At the bottom of the hill, there's a bunch of torches and a mob, an angry priest and an angry chief priest, and there's a bunch of soldiers, and they're heading his way. And what the disciples' eyes cannot see, Jesus sees, because he knows the future and he knows they're coming for him. And in all of it, the greatest heartache of all of it is it's being led by one of his own disciples, Judas. who's about to betray him with a kiss, and Jesus knew that was coming too. And in the midst of all that pain that was marching its way toward them, Jesus has a few things to say. And it's exactly what my heart needed to hear this week. I need it this week. I needed to study. I needed this moment with Jesus. And maybe it's what you need today. We're in John chapter 16, starting with verse 16. Jesus said, "In a little while, you will see me no more. And then after a little while, you will see me." Wow, that sounds like a magic trick that's about to happen. We know, those of us who know the life of Jesus, we know what he's talking about. He's going to die. He's going to be buried. They're not going to see him for a while. But then he's going to be resurrected, and they're going to see him again. And the disciples are confused when Jesus talks. They often have trouble putting all of this together. If when you're listening to the words of Jesus, you sometimes go, huh, what? You're just like they were. And they had total access to him. They could even see facial expressions during that time. So there's nothing new here, but they're confused a little bit. Jesus then begins to explain, verse 20. "Very truly I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices." Now again, if we're talking about his death, yeah, I can see how that would make the disciples mourn. But why will the world rejoice at that? Well, because they got rid of him finally. In the leader's mind of Rome, in the leader's mind of the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees, they're going to rejoice when Jesus dies. And Jesus identifies that. But look what he does next. "You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy." Oh my goodness. Am I reading that right? That passage begins with the word grief and ends with the word joy. How do I put those together in my life? In fact, no one in our world starts sentences like that way. No one secular, no secular teachers out there start with, "You will grieve, but it will turn to joy." Nobody says things like that except Jesus. It's almost as if what God is saying through his son is, "I'm going to flip your sorrow. You're going to have sorrow, but then I'm going to flip it to this unbelievable joy." He's not talking about happiness still. Let's keep this focus clear. Talking about joy, something that's deep inside of us. And how Jesus could even talk about that right now. If I would have been these guys' leaders, I'd have been really mad because I know what's coming. When he gets arrested, they're going to abandon him. They're going to scatter. It's so funny that the scriptures use the word scatter. The disciples scattered because way back in the Old Testament, in the prophecy of Zechariah, guess what Zechariah prophesied it? And we didn't know for a long time that it was a prophecy regarding the Messiah. He gives this wisdom. He says, "Strike down the shepherd and the sheep will scatter." That's a statement from Zechariah. And then when this happens in the life of Jesus, we all step back and went, "Oh, that was a Masonic prophecy. That was about the Messiah." Yeah, Jesus knows they'll scatter. And even in the midst of all of this, as he's walking and he knows this mob is marching toward him, he stops and turns around. "You're going to have sorrow tonight. But then I'm going to flip it to joy. You just got to, don't give up on me. Stay with me. You're going to love this when it all turns out for you." Do you sense what Jesus is going through? Then he's going to illustrate it here. And the illustration is just perfect. It comes from Jesus, who was not married, didn't have children. He says in verse 21, "A woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come. But when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that the child is born into this world." All right, I'm not a woman, but it is my deep understanding that having a baby hurts. I'm on track with that, right? Bonnie I'd been working outside, and I came in, my finger was covered with blood, and I had this huge splinter underneath my nail that I couldn't pull out. And then she got a needle and she was trying to dig that thing out. And I was like, oh my goodness, I was in anguish. And then I made the mistake of saying, now I know what it feels like to have a baby. Bonnie stabbed me so deep with that needle. I forgive her, but man, it's just so fascinating to me that the whole world knows that women, as they're going into labor, man, there's a lot of fear, a lot of anguish, because no one looks forward to that level of pain. But the minute they have the baby, they're filled with joy. And then after a while, ladies, you all want to have another baby? What's wrong with you? No man goes through that level of excruciating pain and then goes, I can't wait to do it again. That's just not us. And so Jesus totally in tune with what's going on here. But again, remember, he's talking about the difference between sorrow and joy. You're going to go through sorrow, but there's this joy that's going to come down on you. Verse 22, so it is with you. Now is your time to grieve. It's going to happen. But I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. I'm going to make a bold statement here, but I feel this deep inside. I think I can endure anything as long as I see a light at the end of the tunnel. I don't want to be challenged with that. I don't want to be tested. But if I'm reading Jesus right and what he's saying here, I think I can endure anything as long as I see a light at the end of the tunnel. And Jesus is giving us that light. Sometimes that light is a reality here on earth. Sometimes it's not a reality here on earth. Sometimes it's a reality that comes in the next life. Regardless of when it comes, healing comes to everybody, whether it happens here or there. Repaired relationships come to everyone. Sometimes here, sometimes we have to wait till there. Hearts are mended every time. Sometimes they're mended here. Sometimes we have to wait till we're there. Yeah, I will take away that grief and I will turn it to joy. God flips our sorrow. How this whole thing ends with Jesus as he's talking with his disciples again. Picture this mob. They're marching toward Jesus. Verse 33, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. There may be a peace in you. In this world you will have trouble. Oh boy, trouble is marching toward them right now. But take heart, I have overcome the world. If you remember one thing, just remember this today from me. I don't think life gets easier. I just think we get stronger. Life doesn't get easier, but I think we get stronger. There's an author who wrote this word. Christians are like nails. The harder you hit them, the deeper they go. The deeper we go into our relationship with Christ, the deeper we go into our walk with God, the deeper we go into our listening to the Holy Spirit, the deeper we go into the Word of God, the deeper we go. The harder you hit us, the deeper we go. If you don't drill down deep, then you're setting yourself up for some failure. That sorrow could take your legs under out of you. Inside this whole thing, there's troubles, but then Jesus immediately shifts our focus to joy. Why? Because even though death is knocking at his door, death is not the last chapter in the life of Jesus. And when death comes knocking on our door, death is not our last chapter either. In John chapter 11, Jesus said this, I am the resurrection and the life. Here, wait a minute, stop. One day when you and I take our last breath here and then we wake up in the arms of Jesus, we're waking up in the arms of the one who said this. Now read it. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives believing in me will never really die. Isaiah chapter 26. This was a nugget to find. Your dead will live. All you dead and buried, wake up. Sing. The earth is bursting with life. giving birth to the dead. Winston Churchill believed this. I don't know if he was a man of tremendous words of faith while he was living, but when he died, he wrote his own funeral. He planned his own funeral. Some of you who are historian buffs, you know this story. Winston Churchill, he picked the speakers, he picked the music, he had it all laid out. But what was really important to him was at the end, as his casket was being carried out of the cathedral, Winston Churchill had 2 buglers put up into the cathedral tower. The first one, as his casket was wheeling down the aisle of the church, was to play taps. You know taps. You've heard it at military funerals and gravesides. And it's that haunting signal. It's a bugle signal to the military that the day is over. The day is over. It's time to rest. It's time to lay down. The day is over. And we play taps to mark the passing of a veteran. And Winston Churchill had taps played first. The minute taps was done and his casket was being carried out into the daylight, the second bugler was instructed to play Reveille. Rise up, rise up. The day is beginning. Get up, let's go. What was the message he was trying to send to the people of England of that time? It's probably the message you and I need to hear today. Play on, bugler. Play Reveille so we can hear it loud and clear. Don't call my attention to taps. Let me hear Reveille. This world is so dark right now, Ron. It feels like there's this dark cloud over us. I know. But Jesus said, I have overcome the world. So play on, bugler, play on. But Satan, I still feel these attacks of Satan. I still feel like he's throwing darts at me. You will feel that. A wounded animal lashes out even in its last breath. Even though death is imminent for a wounded animal, it still lashes out with its last strength. And that's what Satan is doing right now. We know Satan is going to be destroyed. He knows he's going to be destroyed. Satan is in the process of dying as I'm speaking. But you can still feel his attacks sometimes. Of course we can. But play on, bugler. Let me hear Reveille. Let me hear the hope of Reveille. Yeah. This world is tough and hard. Jesus said it. In this world, you're going to have trouble. But I've overcome the world, so take heart with all of this. What is the key to finding joy? I think the key to finding joy is hope. I think when you and I find hope, then we discover joy. So Ezekiel was this Old Testament prophet. He was the spokesman of God on the wall for Israel. He was supposed to warn Israel. It's what many preachers see as their responsibility too sometimes, is just to warn you when there's an enemy approaching, when society is pulling us off track with God. It's my job to stand on the wall and protect us and to warn you. And that was Ezekiel's job as a prophet. And God showed Ezekiel how he was going to allow Israel to fall in the dust for a moment. Jerusalem is going to fall. And God revealed all of this to his prophet Ezekiel. But then in 37, something different happens. God starts showing Ezekiel how he's going to raise Israel back up out of the dust. And how he's going to restore Jerusalem out of the fall. I'm going to bring them back to life. And the way God does it is just so, if you allow your imagination to kick in today, man, you could see this better than I can. He shows Ezekiel this valley full of dead man's bones. A vast army had been destroyed there. This is right in tune with biblical time. Even today, in some military ways, we seek the higher ground. That gives you advantage. And in ancient times, one army would be on one hillside, one army would be on the other side. Do you remember the story of David fighting Goliath? You remember that story? They're on these 2 hillsides, and there's this valley floor between them. And neither army wants to go down and attack uphill. So they're just, day after day, they're just facing each other. And finally, the Philistines said, you know what, let's just do this different. Send down our champion. And they send down Goliath into the valley floor. Send down your champion. You know, you remember the story? And David comes down and fights Goliath, and he defeats Goliath there, cuts off his head, you know. So this is right in tune with ancient biblical times. God shows this prophet Ezekiel this valley floor full of dead man's bones. And then God asked his prophet this, can these bones live again? Ezekiel, in a moment of good wisdom, he says, I don't know, Lord, only you know. I've been asked a lot lately, what is God doing right now? I don't know. I'm not even going to assume to know what God is doing right now. There's just a lot going on. And it's dark, and I know that. But I trust in the promises of God, and so in that moment, Ezekiel just says, I don't know, Lord, only you know what you're going to do here. Can these bones live again? You know. And God says this, speak the word of the Lord over the bones, over those dry, dead bones. Just speak the word of the Lord. It's what I feel I'm doing today for you. Just speaking the words of the Lord over you. And so Ezekiel steps up to that vast valley and just hear the word of the Lord. And he starts speaking the word of the Lord. And what happens next is amazing. There's clunking and clattering of bone coming together against bone. Can you hear it? Clunk, 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 clunk. Clatter, 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 clunk, clunk, clunk. This whole valley is just filled with this clunk, 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 clunk. And then tendons start growing over the bones, and then muscle starts growing, and blood vessels, and then tissue starts growing over it, and skin. And now these bodies are all put back together, but they're still not breathing, they're still not moving. And then the Holy Spirit comes sweeping down over that valley, and the breath of God is put back into every one of those dead bones, and they rise up. They rise up, they're back to life, they come back to life right in front of Ezekiel. And God tells Ezekiel, that's what I'm going to do eventually for Israel. They're going to feel sorrow for now, but eventually I'm putting it all back together. Oh my goodness, hear the word of the Lord today. In this world, you will have trouble. But take courage. I've overcome the world. The key to joy is hope. And if you are a Christian, then you believe in a thing called the resurrection. And when Jesus talked about the resurrection, at one point he stopped and he turned and he asked this, you do believe this, don't you? Do you believe in the resurrection? It's a key to hope for your life, and joy then comes back in. It's all tied together. Hear the word of the Lord. I can endure just about anything, I think, as long as I see a light at the end of the tunnel.